at Northwest University in South Africa. She received her BA from St. Olaf and her MA and PhD in theology from the University of Chicago. Her current area of research is about perspectives on children and childhood and world religions, and you have a book coming out about that, which sounds very exciting. Today, we have brought her to talk about vocation and what that means across our lifespan. So please welcome Dr. Marsha Bunge.
Okay. Well, it's great to be here with all of you. For me, it's kind of like a wonderland because our church, we haven't had many people. So today is like natural light, baptism, people singing, children. It was like, where am I? So I have already got a huge boost just being in your presence. And we're like a little mini group here, a little mini consultation about vocation. My topic is about vocation across the lifetime, discerning our callings amidst challenges and changes. Because throughout our life, and gosh, especially during the pandemic, right, we've all been facing so many changes and challenges. My students, I teach at a college, have been having to go online, and students across the country have, or a lot of people my age in the middle of their profession found they lost their job or didn't want their job anymore, or seniors like my mother, who's in assisted living, have had to be in and out of isolation as they navigate a lot of issues personally, professionally, and politically. Even this last year, it's been the hardest year, I have to say, for me and my whole family, with just navigating all these personal, political, professional changes and challenges, including the death of my sister from a, not COVID, but something related to COVID, a kind of collateral damage of COVID where they didn't find a cancer, and then she died of a very aggressive form of cancer, while my mother's in assisted living. So it's been a pivoting year, right? Who knows that word, pivot? And it's just a lot we have to think about, and we're all looking for sources of resilience right now. And 500 years ago, Martin Luther, he articulated a particular notion of vocation or calling that really helped him at a time of plague and political upheaval to navigate the changes around him, and has really helped a lot of people over the centuries now and still today kind of think about, what direction do I go? Oops, I've had an unexpected change, or a change I wanted to move forward. I chose to change, but how do I do that? What kind of things do I think about? How do I stay kind of with a grounded optimism as I move through all these changes and sometimes terrible losses, and kind of find my grounding and sense of purpose? So that's what I want to do today. I just want to introduce you. Some of you know this vocation concept very well. I thought I'd just go real fast through some kind of a refresher course or a very quick intro, but focus on these four elements that help us discern our vocations, whatever age, whether we're young or old, four kinds of sources of inspiration, resilience that can help us navigate around some of these changes. So as I was saying, the vocation is really important in the Lutheran Church, but it's also, and it was articulated by Luther, but it's a very powerful concept for Christians worldwide today. And it's a concept that anyone reflecting not only on career, but also related questions of identity, direction, and purpose find very meaningful. Questions like my students ask, or like my mother's asking still in assisted living. What are my real strengths? What next steps should I take? What core values and set my moral compass help ground me and help navigate things? And amidst suffering and injustices all around us, how can I still make a difference no matter what my age, young or old? So I want to just explore with you quickly the meaning of it, what does it mean, some essentials, and just talk a little bit about the significance of reflecting on vocation for you. Now, I have a handout. I'm not going through all those points, but it's, did we give him that handout? Not yet. Well, we could do that, I think. We could do it at the end, I guess. But it has my outline, and then it has the images I show. that I think can help you, plus 20 questions. We're going to just focus on one of the 20, but you could take this handout home with you and reflect on some challenges you might be facing, you or your family or friends, and think about some of these questions. I have used the questions I have on the handout, the 20 questions, with my students during the pandemic. I started a Vocation reflection journal. My students come from all faith backgrounds and no faith background, but I am telling you, every single one of my students has said, these questions have been so helpful for me. This notion of vocation, I love it. Very moving testimonies of what they found helpful, whether it's thinking about their strengths or their core values or what they're going to do amidst so many changes and challenges in their life. So here we go on a fast intro to vocation. And I have them on the handout. So what does it mean? It can't be equated with narrow concepts today or in Luther's time, such as being a priest, being called to be a pastor. It can't be equated with your profession. Sometimes people say, my calling is my job or my hobby. Luther had a much more comprehensive concept that's simply this, and I think being here in this church, you know something about this. It relates to the sermon we just heard, that we're all called to use our gifts and talents to love and serve others, seek justice, and contribute to the common good. That is our common calling. But we carry out this calling in a wide variety of particular vocations at work, at home, or in civic life. So those are our particular callings. So you can think of our general callings as purpose with a capital P, that Luther said everyone surely has a calling, for everyone is called to love and serve the neighbor. And Martin Luther King Jr., echoing this notion, said in one of his last sermons, everybody can be great because everyone can serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love. So please remember, this notion of purpose is very distinctive and particular. After all, Hitler had a purpose. Mr. Burns in The Simpsons had a purpose to earn as much money as he could, Hitler to gain power. But this is a very particular purpose, a purpose we share in life, to serve others, seek justice, contribute to the common good with our unique gifts and talents. And so our general calling is lived out in a wide variety of particular callings at home, at work, and in civic life. Luther said everyone must benefit and serve the other by means of their own work, so that in this way many kinds of work can be done for the bodily and spiritual welfare of the community. And so this was a radical idea in his time, because perhaps some of you know at the time it's like, whoa, what's the best calling in the world? Being a celibate priest or a celibate nun. That's the way to be holy. That's the way to feel good about yourself, have a sense of worthiness, and a good relation to God. But Luther just blew this apart, and he said, all of our so-called worldly callings are also sacred. They are holy. Being a parent, being a teacher, a professor, a politician, a business owner, they are all worthy callings, all sacred, when and if they contribute to the common good. So that was a radical idea, and it was a very non-hierarchical view of vocation based on the biblical teachings in 1 Corinthians 12, that we're all equal, we're all one body, and we have diverse gifts and callings that contribute to the common good. And gosh, we've sure seen this during the pandemic, haven't we? Where some of these professions, jobs people have, we kind of thought, that's not so important. But now, whoa, the checkout person, right, at the co-op is like, whoa, you honor their calling. Or the people helping, not just the doctors and nurses, but those who are helping, you know, with so much at the hospital, so much of the work that needs to be done, cleaning up, getting ready for a surgery. So we have a much more, I think, growing awareness of the importance of all these kinds of things people are doing in our midst. So given this view of vocation, one thing people who don't even like Lutherans like about Lutheranism is that Lutheranism really emphasized universal education, Because if Luther said everyone has a calling, everyone needs to use their gifts and talents, then everyone, boys and girls, rich and poor, need to have an education. And that was not that was not the policy at the time. It was if you're boys or rich, you would have an education. But that's a wonderful gift of this heritage and of the notion of vocation. The Lutherans have been very good about saying all kinds of callings in the sciences and the arts are sacred callings. So I want to now emphasize 3 vocation essentials for today that are emphasized at our colleges, they're emphasized in our churches, and I hope we remember today. These are 3 important thoughts about vocation that we take from Luther. 1, that our callings are lived out in multiple spheres of life, not just our job, our profession, our paid work, but also at home and in public life, in our community, through our faith community, our neighborhoods, civic life, and in the natural world. So, for example, a lot of times people say my vocation is my job, right? And then they're lost. But no, it's more than that. So in my situation, I'm a professor. Yes, that is my work. I'm paid to do it. I love doing it. I'm a researcher and a scholar. But and my research takes me to many parts of the world before the pandemic, but now more grounded here at home. But I'm also a family member. I'm a wife. I have 2 kids. I'm helping care for my mother, who's still, by the way, very alert and navigating this loss of her daughter, my sister, in isolation, in assisted living, when you couldn't even get out to see her as my sister was dying. So that's part of my calling, certainly. And doing work, especially with child advocacy. I do a lot of work with secular and religious organizations. So all of you have that kind of, it's important to remind ourselves we have very important roles in these various spheres of our life. And for my students, this is very freeing for them. Sometimes they're so focused, I have to be a dentist. Uh-oh, I got a D in biology. Uh-oh. And suddenly their calling, the ones they were moving toward, isn't going to work out. But they realize, wow, I have gifts and talents. I'm already doing a lot with my community, with my family. And it kind of frees them to think about their life in this bigger picture, how they're serving others. So another important point about vocation is that it's lifelong and it's dynamic. It's not limited by age or by paid work. So Luther emphasized everyone has a calling. That means children, students, paid workers, volunteers, those retired. Callings are not static. They change over time. If you think about Jimmy Carter, gosh, he's still going, isn't he? He's 96. He was a farmer. He was in the military, a president, and he keeps serving in the ways he can. Or that's my mother, who was a school counselor. And of course, she retired, then she was a great, wonderful grandmother. And now she's still a kind of a counselor helping people navigate in assisted living. So it's lifelong. We also know young people who are making a big difference as young people. We are impressed and inspired by them. People like Martin Luther King was jailed when he was very young, in his 20s. Greta Thunberg has been a spokesperson for climate, attending to climate change, and a lot of young people involved in Black Lives Matter. So it's something we can do at every age. And I have a question in our 20 questions later related to that. Now, this third point I want to make is important for discerning when we have a lot of struggles and challenges. Because discerning our particular callings is a multifaceted and relational and often daring process. It isn't something simple. Some of my students think discerning my calling is a one-time lightning bolt. I didn't hear it, right? The voice from the sky. Or it's a plan. God has a plan for me. I just have to find the plan. Oops, I wanted to be the dentist, but oops, God must have another plan. And if I just find it, I'll be on my right road. Or sometimes people think a lot of my students think this way. I have to think about my calling. I have to either really think about it or listen to my gut, or maybe it's both. I don't know. I'm looking at brain studies. Have to figure it out by myself. I've got to have the energy to figure it out by myself. Or some people think that vocation is a smooth, linear path. Once you get on it, it's going to be smooth rolling here. But life's not like that, is it? Life's filled with a lot of ups and downs and joys and sorrows, personally, professionally, politically. We think we're going to be on this nice, smooth trail, and then illness can hit us, or some other loss of our job. My students are struggling with loss of, identity, or even how to be a student during the pandemic. So lots of kinds of losses and ups and downs. So of course it's dynamic. And I think these 4 things, and this is what I hope you can take back with you, I'm giving you this little diagram and the 20 questions, is there's many elements to this process, but often discerning our particular calling. Even my mother trying to figure out, what does she do with the death of my sister? How does she move forward? Or my students, what is my major now that I can't be the dentist? Involves a few things, and these are 4 important ones. Knowing your gifts and talents, knowing your passions, like a strength finder type of thing. What are my strengths? That's one thing. But also cultivating those strengths through practicing, education, mentorships, right? We all know somebody, right, who had amazing gifts and talents, and they wasted them. Even my young students, 18, know friends who wasted their talents. So it requires some grit, some persistence, some imagination. How can I cultivate these skills I have? And then if you go over to the top right there, it's also attending to injustices and the needs of the neighbor in our world. Looking around us, seeing what the needs are, what's calling us, what kinds of things break our heart. I do a lot with child advocacy. It's terrible. 27% of children in our country are hit so hard they sustain injuries. So once I had kids and saw how amazing children are, I paid more attention in my scholarship and my work and my advocacy to children. And really, it's heartbreaking. So that's something breaks my heart, certainly climate change, other issues, racial injustices. But we need to think about that. How might I address those issues with my gifts? And then finally, we do need, in the bottom right corner there, nurturing religious and spiritual life, attending to our core values, attending to things that feed our soul, coming to worship, mindfulness. Music is also a very powerful tool for renewal. So we need to tap into that too. And I'll just give you one quick example how complex it can be, because it does require not just us, thinking as hard as we can or listening to our gut to make it happen. No, we have to, it's very relational. We talk to other people, to our communities. We look at the needs of the neighbor. We look at injustices. We look at things that feed our soul. We look at some of the duties we are given that we didn't really want, responsibilities. I have students now who have to help their siblings, at home studying because of the pandemic. They weren't asking for that role, but they take up that role, given the needs of the family. So it's complex and it's highly relational, but it's wonderful. And it's helpful if you tap into these 4 areas, if you don't get stuck in one part, only what's my strengths, or if you can just open it up a little and try to check it out in these 4 areas, kind of like checking out the parts of your brain, we're learning so much with neuroscience about the brain, aren't we? We have our critical side, but we're all one type of side in our brain, and it's kind of like that, befriending these 4 areas. And just one quick example from my life. I had a son, biological son. It was easy. My grandma had 14 children. I thought, yeah, I can just pop them out, right? So I had the one late in life, got married late, then I had a miscarriage. And it was devastating. It was like, oh, it challenged my identity. I kept seeing another kid in the back seat, and I couldn't get it out of my mind. I liked being a mom. I wanted another child, and I was really determined to have another biological kid. I was scared to adopt. I was terrified to adopt. But then some things helped me discern a little more clearly. I went to a support group. I wasn't just crying by myself or with my husband. I went to a support group of people who'd lost, praying, seeing the needs of children, going back to biblical wisdom. That was also important to me. I kept thinking, it has to be a biological kid. But then I realized the whole Bible says we're all adopted children of God. Why am I focused on my biological egg hopping out there? And suddenly it opened my heart and my mind to considering adoption. We adopted a little girl from China. And she's just been the blessing of our life. She's 20 now. So that was something, I'm glad I opened my heart. I'm glad I thought larger than just my aim of the biological kid to have this daughter. So it's tapping into the needs of others, tapping into those 4 areas. In my life, I needed to attend. I know I can be a good mom. I want to be a good mom. I practice being a good mom. But I needed to attend more to the needs of the neighbor. There's kids out there who needed adopting. I needed to be a mom in that fit. And I needed to tap deeper into my own faith to say, why am I and trying to force out a biological kid when we're all children of God? So that helped me. Now maybe you need some other areas where you strengthen, but I have found this very freeing. My students have found this very freeing when they write their comments about the Vocation journal, where they answer these 20 questions I give to you. Some like it, some different. They're very moved, and kind of they see a bigger picture of themselves. They also go deeper into their core values of who they are, so they feel more grounded and ready to be more nimble as they navigate life's challenges. So social sciences, I'll just quit with this, but they also talk about these areas is really important. Knowing your strengths, right? Gives you some confidence. There's books about that by psychologists, social scientists. Cultivating your talents. I love this book called Grit. That's very popular about, you have these gifts, but you got to cultivate them and practice using them. Or serving others. It's a way that we, as human beings, are often happier. We're happier when we share our gifts with others. And then finally, knowing our core values and nurturing our spiritual life. Sometimes 20 years ago in my career, social scientists would sometimes say, oh, spirituality, that's just flaky. But now, boy, social scientists are saying, wow, spiritual life, religious community life like this is powerful for children and powerful for people of any age. It helps build resilience. So those are some things. There's many stories we could tell about pivotal experiences in people's lives, like Bonhoeffer, Martin Luther King, or the Lutheran Nobel Peace Prize winner, Alema Bowie, how they were given things they didn't really want to take up, but they took up and made such a difference. So I have that question. I have other questions, but maybe you have some questions, and maybe we could hand out the handout now. But there's a question number 10, and we could maybe just see if you have some thoughts about this number 10. I'm giving you the sheet that shows people have vocations in various spheres of life, and it's very fun to talk even with children and grandchildren about this. How are you helping others in school, in our family? It's very freeing and very meaningful to talk about this with people of any age. And then these are the 4 areas. And again, there's more. I would prefer to put up like 21 points, but 4 is probably enough. Where, yes, it's helpful to know talents and cultivate them, but also injustices and nurturing religious and spiritual life. So question number 10, you'll see on the back, I have these questions that you can use with your family if you like. They relate to how are you serving others, your strengths. It has all the kind of areas. But number 10 is kind of interesting. And I thought if you wanted to take a couple minutes, you could just turn to your neighbor or for just a minute and reflect on what's a challenge or change you're going through, prompting you to reflect anew. I don't know, do we have enough time, or do people, like we got 5 more minutes?
No, I think
Okay.
I think that's a good
Is that
exercise.
okay?
Kind of.
Yeah, so maybe
take
we
a look
just
at
talk
number
to
10.
each other,
Yeah.
a couple people, just 1 or 2 minutes each. And just, it could be something in the past or now, who or what might help you discern a new direction. Or maybe you don't have a big challenge right now, but in the past, what was a pivotal moment, like with my adoption story? What made a difference in helping you move to the next step? Or maybe something some of your children or grandchildren are going through and you see an example there. So maybe just take a minute each, try to find a neighbor. You're so lonely. And take here, you could be with him. Chuck. Yeah, Chicken Chuck. Maybe just an example. You don't have to get as personal if you don't want, but just an example. So I think we have enough handouts, right? Great.
Okay, 1 more minute, and then we will
See if you have questions.
see if we have questions or comments that you could share.
All right. Yeah. So have you got some insights you'd want to share, or just a thought or two, or some questions about this notion or any of the little diagrams I gave you, so that you could use this as a tool if you like? Yes.
I have more of an observation than a question, Dr. Bunge, but when you were talking about, the call and vocation, and I thought, and then we get these little mini calls within the call. And I thought specifically of our call committee, because we've just gone through that, looking for a new pastor. And those people were, asked to do this. And I think of that they never in a million years suspected that would happen for them. Mm-hmm. And I wonder how it goes on in our lives. Each day is a possibility for getting one of these little mini vocational calls. It doesn't have to be anything grand or big. It can happen in a short span of time.
Right. How well said, right? Where you weren't looking to be on the call committee, but then you were asked, and yes, I could help discern, and then it became something meaningful. I like that, mini calls. Any other observation, question, comment? Or something else you would say, oops, you should have put this on the diagram.
Yeah, right. So this is my sister, Christy. She lives in Arkansas, and she came for the weekend for a funeral, and we have spent so much time this weekend talking about question 10, Marcia. Not even realizing it, because Our father just turned 86, our mother is 80, so how are we going to navigate our parents through that stage, right? And she has a son graduating from college, I have 3 older kids and grandkids. I mean, this is just ongoing all the time, right? I think it's a question, and our conversation this morning reminded us about your relational comment. Even though your students are trying to figure it out alone, we are too. Why do we do that? I mean, we just need to talk a little more often, and just maybe how people show up in our lives to show us the way that we weren't even expecting, but to be so grateful, right? So anyway, the relational piece and this is just dynamic and ongoing, right? Just reminded us of that. So thank you.
And isn't it easier to, for me to tell Kathy what I think she would be good at than for me to come up with it myself, right? It's so much easier. So I think that's really important, because as Marsha was giving us this information, I was overload. There's a lot there. There's a lot to what Chick shared with us during worship. So we have a lot that we could sort out, but important to talk with someone else about that. Because I think of my kids as well, and just the community, the spiritual, the work, the calling elsewhere, all those things. And why are we asked to do this? Is it so that we can sort of be, they used to have the hierarchy of happiness, was it the Maslows, and it's sort of the self-actualization, only it's really the God actualization. That's why we are.
The beauty of this loving and serving the neighbor and our own self-care, right, along with it, and noting what we can and cannot do. That thing about relational is also interesting. It can be really long-term relation, like I'm going to go to my spiritual advisor, I got my mentor, my doctoral advisor. Sometimes it's a passing comment. Students write to me. I spend hours with some. They don't write. Then you spend like 2 minutes. Hey, have you ever thought of this? You have really gifts in that way. And they write you this long letter 10 years later. Thank you so much for your comment in the hallway. And it was like, whoa. So it's kind of being open and nimble and at ease, kind of listening around. Thank you for that. Other comments? Yes.
The most important thing out of this, that you keep coming back to community. And what I'm realizing is that all of these talents that I have, whatever my calling is, I can't do it outside of the community. The community has become more and more important. And we live in a society that touts the individual, the rugged individual. And I'm finding that it's good to hear community, because I think that's the trump card over that me, if you will.
Yeah, and people in the health sciences are really into this now. For a long time they said, oh, children in religious communities, they'll just get abused, right? Well, sadly, there's abuse everywhere. In your sports, gymnastics, whatever, you will find 5% of abusive children, okay? But they're finding like, wow, in a community like this, what if you were an atheist? Look what that would do for your kid to bring your kid to this church. Whoa, meaning, someone noticing you, instant mentors, leadership. So it's amazing what community does for our health and for one another.
I'm doing a Bible study, and this kind of reminded me of this, the spiritual part of the spheres, and how it was more portrayed in the Old Testament that maybe our God was not a loving God, and that he kicked Adam and Eve out of, but he didn't kick them. He was hurting. He was gently hurting them to a new place. And I think about the big changes that happen in our lives, that if we can think of it more of a hurting and them guiding us than, the big change being so painful, and trying to look for guidance from him. So.
And what's very powerful in our tradition, I have to say, is you can take time to name a grief, to grieve. You can do that. You know, it's like, okay, I got to move on. We can grieve. We have lament traditions, but we also have the renewal traditions, right? And helping us move forward on all these practices we have, whether it's music, communion, working together, serving other people to help us move forward. So I love that kind of paradox of we can grieve and we must name these. We can't shove them underneath. It's not good for us. We can lament, but we also have the Psalms, the praise, the gratitude along with it. My mother, I have to say, she's 99, she's still alert. To see in her this, with my sister's death, the grief, but the gratitude. The grief and the gratitude. And that's from a long practice. She's a lifelong Lutheran of, forgiving, lamenting, but naming bad realities, harsh, but also being grateful, being open to something new, even at 99, where she needs to move forward. That's just been unreal. Thank you for that. All
Thank you.
right.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you can enjoy some of these questions with loved ones on the phone, on Zoom, in person. I love talking about them with my students and my family and friends. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you for
your
coming,
contributions.
Marsha.